Hello, and welcome to Euraccess Smart Talks.
The Smart Talks podcast series is an EU-funded Euraccess project which provides information and assistance to researchers at any career stage.
Euraccess supports the EU research area in its ambition to create a single borderless market for research, innovation and technology in the EU.
We support researchers in mobility, careers within and outside academia, innovation and entrepreneurship.
We strive to increase scientific collaboration between Europe and the world. Today, our guest is Dr. Frank Danesy, a strategist, academic and innovator whose career has spanned the armed forces, aerospace, academia and entrepreneurship. With over 20 years of experience at the European Space Agency, Dr. Danesy brings deep expertise in strategic intelligence, human resource management and leadership in high-stakes environments.
He's taught at institutions such as European Business School, University of Mannheim, and the University of Malta, where he bridges the theory and practice in strategic management, particularly in the space sector. Dr. Danesy is also a co-founder of Orbit8, a venture focused on innovative career guidance for the next generation. His global experience and cross-sector insights make him a true leader in shaping the future of research careers and mobility. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome. So, our first question would be, your career began in the armed forces and transitioned through roles at British Airways, the Free University of Berlin and ESCP. So how did these diverse experiences shape your approach to research and strategic management?
Well, the environments, of course, are very different. If you look at the armed forces, if you look at British Airways, if you look at academia, being in these different environments gave me insights into how different structures, how different organizations work. And since a large part of the work that I have done in the research field has been related to the social sciences, understanding how the people interact in different settings, of course, also has a significant impact and has had a significant impact on the way that I approach the research questions that I raise and try to answer.
Do you approve of Daniel Kahneman's strategy, like these two models of our thinking? First model that is quickly understanding and taking the decisions, not very logical. Mm-hmm. And the second system that is more conscious and maybe measuring statistics also in this respect. Do you think that people really are consist of these two systems?
Well, I don't know if I would frame it in that way. I mean, from my point of view, what we try to do in the research field, in any kind of research field, is to build knowledge. So if we take a systematic approach to gathering the knowledge, then I think that we're on the right track. So that means, first of all, understanding that there is a problem, then understanding what the questions are that are associated with that problem. So if you think about a question, the question isn't just a question. A question is like a scalpel that cuts to the bone. It's something that actually enables us to understand what it is that we're dealing with. And once we have defined the questions, then the rest flows from that. So then we can set our objectives, we can decide what our research approach is going to be. And the research approach always has to be reflective of the questions that we're trying to answer. So to me, that's really the approach, and to try to categorize it in two different general approaches that people take is probably useful for certain discussions, but from where I come from, it doesn't really mesh.
You have worked at various institutions in multiple different countries. What are the challenges and opportunities which you had to face to adapt to different cultures and different academic environments?
One of the, I was faced with different cultures pretty early on in my life, and what you come to realize is that in different cultures and different environments, people evaluate things very differently. And so I was just telling somebody the other day when I was a kid going to school in Canada, for us it was perfectly normal to walk across the grass of the front yards of the houses to get from home to school and from school back to home. And when we arrived in Berlin, I was 13, I did the same thing. I walked across some grass to get to where it was that I was going, completely oblivious to the idea that some people might not like that. Anyway, people came out and started hollering at me, and so I recognized that there was a cultural difference there. And so really what dealing with different cultures has done is it has sensitized me again to different ways that people look at things, and to understand that even so in my own frame of reference, something might be completely normal from a different perspective. It might be completely abnormal. And so to understand that and then to approach it accordingly and to try to put some sort of a mental bracket around that encompasses it all. That to me is the challenge, but it's also the opportunity, because if you manage to do that, then both scientifically and also personally, you're in a really good place. So.
And considering different research environments, academia, do you have any suggestions for researchers who want to be mobile and transition from their original country to a different one to work, teach, or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly, I mean, my experience, just to put that forward, first of all, also to frame it a little bit, has been with American universities, Canadian universities, German universities, French Fund d'école, British universities. I'm probably missing something, well, Maltese, of course, and South African. So, and what I recognized was that in each of these environments, the approaches are unique. It's recognizable that it's still research, but they're rather unique and rather special. So, with every additional experience, you're actually growing yourself, and that to me has been one of the really great experiences to see how research, how education, how teaching is done in different environments, and then to take a little slice along of whatever it is that fit and make it a part of my package. Yeah.
Opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
Oh, most certainly. Yeah.
And educating yourself a little bit also.
Oh, yeah,
constantly.
that never stops.
Yeah. So, can I ask you one honest question? Where is the hierarchical structure more harsh, in academia or in armed forces?
Oh, that's easy. Armed forces, clearly.
Yeah, okay. Are you comfortable with one of them more than with another?
No, I feel perfectly comfortable with both.
Okay.
I mean, it's, you know, that's one of the things, I guess, that also comes back to the question that you were raising earlier, because especially when you sort of move through different cultural environments, you eventually assimilate, and so then it becomes a part of you as well. And so when I'm in a military environment, I feel very comfortable there. But when I'm in an academic environment, I feel equally comfortable there.
Because you know how to act in each environment.
Knowing would be a cognitive process, and it's something that goes deeper than the cognitive process. So it's really assimilation. It's adaptation to the environment because you're familiar with that environment. Yeah.
When you got to know the environment, you still are struggling, though, no? When
In the beginning?
Yes.
Oh, gosh, yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, always when it's a new environment, there are new challenges, and you take a turn and it turns out to be the wrong turn, and then you hit a wall, and then you have to turn. You know, it's a little bit like these little figures that roll around on the ground and then hit a wall, and then they go someplace else. And so it's a lot of trial and error. Of course, you can read up beforehand, and maybe you have some good information beforehand, but there's a lot of trial and error that goes into that. But then eventually, you get there, and you begin to understand, and that is still at the cognitive level, but then the more time you spend in that environment, the more it becomes second nature to you. And that's what I was referring to earlier. So, yeah.
And if these things even can be compared, but what you say about geographical and intersectoral mobility, which is more challenging?
What do you mean by intersectoral mobility?
You switched from academia
Well, like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I would look at it in that way. I think that when you're in a different environment, you're in a different environment, period. And so if that environment happens to be framed in an organizational or institutional way, or if that environment happens to be framed in some sort of national, cultural way, is almost irrelevant for the experience. So obviously it's not irrelevant from many other points of view, but from the notion of sort of parachuting into this different environment and then trying to find your way around, it's the same.
Does support matters in this respect? When you come to organization, what kind of support you think is valid for example, researchers that are switching between organizations?
What sort of support?
Yes.
In the institutions, like
Yes.
in the academic institutions, that's a fascinating question, and that varies substantially from what I've seen. But the thing is that my experience in that regard, there's also a very strong temporal element, because when I was working on my first doctorate, this was in the 80s, and so and this was in Germany, in Berlin, and that environment has also moved on and progressed. I mean, when I did my doctorate at the Free University of Berlin, 80% of the PhD students did not succeed in completing their doctorate. They had no actual support from their supervisors. They had occasional conversations in which they hoped that their supervisor read the material that they provided, and the supervisors often didn't, which meant that the conversations that took place were not necessarily so meaningful. And then at the end of the process, they would deliver a thesis, and sometimes it went through and other times it did not. And so I was fortunate with my supervisor. Was a very serious, very stern person. If you read his the things that he published, he was also very minimalist in everything, but a very sharp thinker. And so he took the time to read my material, but he also took his time to read my material. So there were tremendous time lapses that occurred. When I completed my first manuscript after 13 months, so pretty quick, and I gave it to him, and it took him 27 months to read it. But, and this is, and the discussions that we had were often focused on my work, but very often were not focused on my work. They went off on some sort of a tangent. And what I experienced elsewhere in South Africa, for instance, I saw a very high degree of focus and professionalism. I was very, very much impressed with. Also the aspect of philosophy. Is sometimes the doctorate that you receive is a doctor of philosophy, right? So, and what I found is that in some systems that notion that it's a doctor of philosophy is taken more seriously than others. So, for instance, in South Africa, what I discovered was that before you start researching whatever it is that you want to research, you first really have to get complete command of the philosophical aspects of the research that you're going to do. So it's basically an entirely additional line of study that you're going through, which is, again, mind expanding. I mean, it was a fabulous experience. But to really have an understanding of and justification for every step that you go through, ontologically, epistemologically, and so forth, to even ask yourself the question, what is reality? Or how do I know that I know? And these are philosophical questions, and in subsystems, they have to be answered before you actually embark on your study. And so that, to me, was pretty amazing and very different. And so the point is that it's not just a little bit of a change from one system to another, it's a fundamental change that you're going through. And so if you're prepared to go that route and see it as a journey, then it's pretty gratifying. Yeah.
And challenging, yeah.
For sure. Speaking about change, can we transition for a second to some top secret stuff? Like someone deeply involved with that.
This is what we have to say, yeah.
And also I have to brag.
Philosophically, as someone involved in strategic intelligence and with the evolving role of technology, how do you see the changing role of strategic intelligence in today's world?
That's an interesting one. That's a really good question. Tongue-in-cheek, what is sometimes said is that intelligence is the second oldest profession in the world. And if
we know the first one.
We know the first one, yes.
I was about to ask you.
And we know that it's been around for a long time because there are historical accounts. I mean, there are references in the Bible to it. So you might believe everything that the Bible says, or you might not, but what you cannot deny is that there is a document from that time that also refers to espionage. Or if you look at the old Sun Tzu account of warfare, which dedicates an entire chapter to espionage. So the idea of using intelligence for various purposes, to strengthen your military, to strengthen your state, to expand your activities, to secure your activities, whatever the purpose is, intelligence has been around for a long time. Interestingly enough, although it's been around for such a long time, it has not really warranted serious research, until the mid-'80s. In the mid-'80s, there was this rash of espionage cases. There was 1985, I think it was, or 86, one of the two, the year of the spy, when a particularly large number of at the time Soviet spies were unmasked in the United States. And because there was so much of that sort of activity going on, it piqued not only the interest of the public, but it also piqued the interest of academics. And so then basically from the mid-1980s onward, that's when intelligence studies started becoming a discipline of its own. Now, mid-1980s. So we're talking about, around about 40 years ago, right? If you think about your discipline, and if you think about where your discipline was 40 years after it was initiated, I mean, there was so much to do and so much to learn, and also new avenues to try out, and then dead ends, and to figure out, no, you have to do it in a different way, and so on. So there's a lot of work to be done, but there is a lot of work that has been done. My particular interest is, I come in from the counterintelligence point of view, so I'm very much focused on that. I'm also very much focused on the strategic intelligence, literally at the strategic level. So there the question is, because intelligence is sometimes also looked at in somewhat of a critical way, and Big Brother is watching that kind of stuff, which is nonsense. Well, it depends on the system, but as far as the principle of it is concerned, it's nonsense. The idea is basically this. Think about it. Let's say that you're a political decision maker. That's your job. And the people have voted you into your office, or in any case, you have to make decisions. Now, you can make decisions in one of two ways. You can make your decisions based on absolutely no knowledge of the world around you, or on the basis of knowledge concerning the world around you. Which is the better way to do it?
Way number two, of course.
It's a leading question. But then if number two is the better way to do it, how are you going to get that knowledge? Unless you have organizations of some sort whose job it is to impartially, that's the important thing, impartially collect that knowledge and to put it together in such a way that it actually supports you in making good decisions. And so that's really what it's about. Of course, there's also abuse in the area, so there has to be proper oversight. That's also clear, or there can be abuse in the area, so there has to be proper oversight as well. But that's the backdrop to it. So to me, it's really it's a wide open field with a huge amount of virgin territory that needs to be addressed. And I find that quite attractive, so it's the reason why I've been focusing on that a fair bit.
And two words caught my ear, impartially and I forgot the second one, but impartially was the most important thing. How do you see artificial intelligence as a system that is fully developed by humans, that is controlled, that has certain rules, as a means to collect data, analyze it, and give this information to the decision makers? Is it in terms of being impartial good enough, or aren't we yet there at that point?
I mean, with AI, I'm no expert, so I can only respond with what I do understand reasonably well. I mean, one of the things, regardless of any kind of generation of knowledge, is that you're filtering phenomena through your brain. And by doing that, you're invariably going to introduce some sort of a bias. It would be wonderful to think that you can get rid of the biases. You can't. But what you can do is you can be aware of them and therefore mitigate. Now, if we can do that with artificial intelligence as well, and if we can understand what the bias is that the AI has, that invariably will have built into it because of the models that the individuals had, the mental models that the individuals had to put it all together, then I think that we're on a reasonable way. There are different views on can you achieve objectivity? Does it exist? Is it or will we always be subjective? I happen to believe that we're always subjective. We can't escape our mental, our mental.
And not in all the disciplines, definitely. We are talking about social humanity.
Well, not necessarily, because I mean also, if we do quantitative research and we're looking at relationships between different phenomena using certain statistical or mathematical methods, yeah. There we could say, okay, objectively that's the situation. But if it's a question of the term verstehen, understanding, to really capture the essence of something, I don't really achieve that by establishing a correlation. Mm-hmm. That's, so I need to put it all together. At the moment that I start putting it together, so the individual studies into a framework, mm-hmm. What am I doing? What am I doing in that situation? I'm introducing my thinking into this overall framework. And the moment I do that, I've said goodbye to objectivity.
Yeah, sure. I mean, everyone are very much aware of how biased AI is, but as if researchers are not biased. But also regarding...
Depends on the research.
Yeah, I mean, if it is technology, we push the button and the light is on, so everything works fine.
Sure.
We are in objective reality right here at the center. But when we are talking about the different cognitive disciplines, it is very hard to navigate between opinion and attitude. Probably, and the difference for me is when opinion is based on something and attitude is just your attitude. Probably it has some rationale in it, but not so much when we are. And regarding decision makers, this is the trickiest thing, I guess, because we probably we need to understand the perspective. Do we really need to strive for objectivity here? Because good decision is good for me, not good for you, and etc. It could be viewed from the different angles, and objective well-being isn't there, definitely still not in place. But what is your attitude to the open access regarding this strategic intelligence topic?
Open access, you mean
publishing papers. Everyone to understand.
I mean, I think it's important to distinguish between work that's being done in the research area, so development of new ways of thinking, models, and that sort of thing, from information that is privileged information and that isn't really subject to the research process. So, I mean, if for instance, I communicate that the reason why somebody becomes a spy, the old thinking is mice. I don't know if you're familiar with the money, the ideology, the coercion, and ego. So I can communicate that, and that's a framework. Or I can take this new 5-factor framework, and I can say, well, there are always triggers, there's motives, there's organizational vulnerabilities, there's market opportunities, and disinhibiting factors. And I can say that, and that's part of the research thing. Now, where it crosses over into real intelligence is when I have an actual case where I recognize what the individual's triggers are, what the individual's motives are, and so forth. And so that's where the line is, where in the one case, that is privileged information, and that doesn't belong in the public domain. And in the other case, it's merely talking about an approach, which is a social scientific construct, and to speak about that in the public domain is fine.
How close is strategic intelligence research to practice?
Very.
Okay.
Very. I mean, there are two. The thing is that there are two worlds under one roof. So on the one hand, you have the practitioners. Like I said, strategic intelligence or intelligence studies is a relatively new field of research and teaching. But you have the practitioners, and because they're wrapped up into whatever it is that they have to do on a daily basis, they don't really have much time to do the research. The research in their job, of course, and to research certain cases, of course, but not to do research in the academic sense. And on the other hand, so they don't necessarily have that access. On the other side, you have researchers who may or may not have had or have a security clearance, and they have the time that is, in fact, their raison d'etre. They focus on doing the research, but they may not have all the details of ongoing cases. And there is a place, and there are fora where the two meet. I mean, one of them is the International Association for Intelligence Education, which is an association that I'm a member of, proudly a member of, where you have essentially you have the intelligence community, you have the researchers in the field of intelligence studies, and you have industry who come together and exchange. And so I think that there's a role for all of them, and there is an overlap. Of course, there are elements that in each of those communities that or sub-communities that the others might not be so in detail aware of, but maybe they're also not so in detail concerned about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
From your experience in human resource management, what should scientists apply when leading teams and projects in their work in order to better it?
Where do I begin? I actually, I think that, I mean, there's so many different approaches and aspects related to human resources management, related to organizational behavior, good leadership practices, good motivational practices, and so forth. And, but there's actually one thing that when I was working on my doctorate in Berlin, that I learned from someone who at the time was the member of the board of directors of the Ringsma company, so a big German tobacco manufacturer at the time. So he was on the board of directors. He was the director responsible for human resources, and he was also an honorary professor at the University of Hamburg and the Free University of Berlin. And so he came in, and after classes we would sometimes get together, have a dinner, grab a beer. And he was very generous with the insights that he shared with us, and many of these insights actually carried over into my own career as a human resources director. And I think more than anything else, what stuck with me and what really worked was no surprises. So to avoid surprising people, I mean, some people like surprises, but in the work environment, usually they don't. And so if you're very clear, first of all, in your own thinking, and then secondly, also in your communications towards the person that you're dealing with, then you're probably already with that. And in the absence of all the other knowledge, with that, you're probably already on a pretty good track. Now, if you then add to that the additional knowledge, understanding what motivates people, understanding what good leadership practices are, understanding the various steps that you should ideally go through when you're recruiting, when you're training, when you're doing all the different things that you need to do as a manager, then you're probably on a good track. But I think that that's a good place to start.
Now, regarding also the different approaches that we take, because mobility of researchers is inevitable, and that's okay, perfectly okay for open science and exchanging of different practices. Do you think that the approach of universities or research funding or performing organizations that are recruiting these very different researchers, that there is a amount of attitude and attention to dual-use technologies, etc., and understanding the risks and mitigation level is on a good level right now?
I'm not sure what you mean.
If we are talking about, for example, recruiting researchers, and now we are talking about job market as an open market, global, then the amount of attention drawn to different risks regarding incoming or outgoing researchers, different cases with shadow laboratories, how university could approach this. I mean, because we no, everyone, even probably the most eminent research institutions have very limited resources
Sure.
on this. So what would be your view on this, first of all, and maybe advices?
Are you referring to situations where visiting researchers are essentially pilfering
Yeah, for
the knowledge and then making it available to others? That is an issue.
I understand that there is no quick and easy answer to that.
The thing is that, I mean, where I'm hesitating, it's easier to handle that in a
Restrictive way.
Well, in a governmental context or in an industrial context than it is in an academic context. Because in the case of the government, you have security clearances. In the case of industry, you might, if you're working for the government, or if the industry is working for the government, there's also the clearance process. Alternatively, you have other methods that you can put into place. With academics, it's challenging. It really, I think what it boils down to is the individual institute, but I'd have to think it through one more time properly. The individual institute deciding very consciously what information to make available to visiting scientists. I mean, we saw a case not so long ago in Germany, Düsseldorf. Was it Düsseldorf or Duisburg? I'm not sure. Anyway, in the Central West, where there were people who were taking the knowledge and making it available to Chinese institutions. So there probably should have been a little more wisdom and a little more protection of the information, so not making it so easily available. I think what's probably a useful thing to do is, first of all, to work on a need-to-know basis, probably also in the academic context. Which in the intelligence world is something very normal. And perhaps that, I mean, it depends on what you're dealing with. If we're talking about developing some sort of a concept for managing people, if that finds its way to someplace else, who really cares? But if we're talking about certain technologies which may really be an important strategic benefit for the country itself, and may be used against it, then maybe need to know needs to be applied. So
This is very tricky.
Hmm?
This is very tricky. I mean,
I know. Oh, I know.
This is
I know.
sometimes
That's why I'm faltering. I don't. It's. I don't have an easy, good answer to it, other than to say that if it's if the university is working with a certain technology that needs protection, then it needs to be protected. And what that means depends on whose interest it is. I mean, if it's technology that the university is developing for the country itself, then it should probably be applying the same standards that you would if it were an industry. I can't really, because you can't have it both ways. You can't be half in one camp and half in the other camp. I think on that you have to draw a clear line, and you have a decision to make. I've not been in that situation, so I struggle to answer it well. Yeah.
No, it's pretty clear, but there are in place, I mean, certain practices.
Yeah, sure.
Screening,
Yeah.
like initial screening, or but you cannot be sure because sometimes when laboratories working on something, they can understand what they are dealing with. Sometimes with it should be a span of time, and it's not clear straight ahead what we are right here in, and understanding how it can be developed afterwards is also takes time. So it's another level of understanding,
Sure.
probably also as well. let's switch to space. Another hard issue that we have. So you are a specialist in such challenging topics, Frank. I would say not easy to get an overview of each of them and dive deep. But I guess Johan, your turn.
Oh, my turn. Sorry. Having spent more than 20 years in the European Space Agency, what is your approach? Can you share some insights on strategic management in such a high stakes and specialized environment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, one of the important things to realize or recognize with an organization like the European Space Agency is what its ultimate mandate is. So the idea with at least the European Space Agency is not that it works in certain areas and makes those areas its own and then sort of cordons it off to the rest of the world. The idea is to evolve certain areas. Let me give you an example. Telecommunications. The first European telecommunications satellite, Olympus, was a development of the European Space Agency. Now, the European Space Agency developed the satellite, operated the satellite until it eventually was no longer operational. And that satellite was used for various telecommunications purposes, television, radio, so forth. But that sector very quickly became commercialized. So, I mean, if you look at SES Astra, for instance, I mean, that's a company that sort of was a spin-off, well, not a spin-off as such, but that resulted from the work that had been done in that area. So what is the role of ESA? The role of ESA is to help areas mature in the space domain, but when they have reached a certain level of maturity, to then take a step back and let that area actually be looked after by society, by the economy, by commercial operators.
Technically, the relationship between research and industry, the same as
essentially. So that's really it. Now, that said, there are areas that will never, or in all likelihood, never be commercially viable, and yet they're valuable for mankind. The space science is one such area. I mean, if we have a good understanding of our space environment, that advances our knowledge in the various areas, and also ultimately, if you look at space safety, contributes to the safety of the planet. I mean, if you look at some of the recent missions where the idea, for instance, was to see if by impacting an asteroid, whether you could put the asteroid on a different trajectory, which would be kind of nice if you had one heading for Earth and you could change that. That would be pretty cool, and the alternative wouldn't be. So, to understand whether we can do something like that or not, but then that necessitates that we also understand what's coming our way and when. So we have to have a certain awareness of the space environment that we're in. So things like that, and that is certainly never going to be commercially viable. You're not going to find a company that's going to get into space safety in that way.
But again, there are always opportunities, even with this. If you could divert the asteroid space mining, if it could be brought near Earth's orbit, could be more viable commercially. So
absolutely, and I mean that was Obama's vision. He wanted to see a little less activity in the human spaceflight domain and more activity in the space mining domain. So yeah, sure, of course, that's most certainly direction. And if you think about the various areas, so you've got launcher development, and launcher development, of course, it can become. I mean, we see that now with Boeing and SpaceX, that it can be commercially viable. If you look at Earth observation, Remote sensing, absolutely. I mean, that's certainly an area that is viable if you look at, both in terms of meteorology, but also in terms of the science of it. And there's a market for the data. So, that's interesting. If you look at the Copernicus missions and how that has generated and is in the process of generating multi-billion euro markets, which previously weren't there. So there's a lot that can be done. So basically the idea really is, your question was about strategy in the space domain. The idea is that for each of the activity areas to really develop the vision of the activities that should be undertaken now in order to help that area eventually become mature enough to stand on its own feet. So with whatever it is that we're doing today, the idea is to rationalize ourselves out of that equation eventually, but at the same time to look at new areas to venture into. So what we have seen, if you think about the last 15 years or so, is that you don't necessarily have to have a space agency to develop a human capability to fly to space. We saw that. What we're also starting to see is a sort of space tourism, where right now it's the ultra-rich who go to space, but that's how it was with aviation as well. In the early years, it was the ultra-rich who got to fly on airplanes, and today we can hop in a plane for a couple €100 and fly to Malta or someplace else. And so that's also going to be the future of near Earth space travel. But at the same time, then the question is, how does it go on from there? And so the next step, of course, is going to the moon. And so the astronauts that I was involved with hiring at the time, they're going to be putting their boots on the moon in all likelihood, depending on how things go with the American administration right now, but let's assume that that'll work. And then the next step will be Mars, and that is something that if we don't experience it, our grandkids will probably see boots on the Martian surface. And so the idea with the space agencies is always to be one step ahead of everything else, and to try to put it in such a format that the rest of the world can actually benefit from it, and that there's also potential in terms of knowledge that we gain, and also the financial, the economic situation.
I'm sorry about diverging, but when you mentioned the moon, originally in the 20th century, the first landings were made, Neil Armstrong and so on. Mm-hmm. Why is it news or actual again today? Mm-hmm. And why isn't the next step, why was there a break between then and the next step to Mars? Is it a technological barrier? Is it a motivation barrier? Or
it'll be a political motivation more than anything else. I mean, the space, and particularly human space flight during the Cold War, was very much a way for the two ideologically opposed groups to demonstrate their technological prowess. And with the technological abilities that existed in the 1960s, the ultimate objective that was imaginable at the time was to actually get people to land on the moon. And so the idea then was not that landing people on the moon is a means to an end that in the space sense, but more in the military technological sense. So, both the Soviet Union and the United States were racing to get astronauts or cosmonauts on the moon. The space race until that time was actually being won by the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union had the first satellite, had the first living being in space, had the first man in space, first woman in space, had a lot of firsts. And the United States was tagging behind, and then at some point when Kennedy was president, he set this goal that the United States by the end of the decade would do that. So, and so then when that objective was reached, there was no need to continue with it. In fact, later missions were discontinued because, they were just
financially not feasible.
Yeah, and there was, the goal was reached. But now, today, we look at it differently because, first of all, being on the moon gives us a possibility to expand human presence, which may one day prove to be important. The other point is that it's also a learning process to enable us to travel further into our own solar system, so particularly to Mars, but then also sometime in the distant future beyond. And so it's a step along that way. And so it's putting people on the moon today is a completely different game than it was back in the 60s. So strategically it has a completely different meaning.
If previously it was, can we return a little bit back?
Sure.
About the asteroids hitting Earth? We do not have, if I'm not mistaken, we do not have a program that is currently monitoring the whole.
We do.
We do.
We do.
Have.
Yeah. So.
And a lot of volunteers that are watching.
That in any case as well, and there was also a network that the European Space Agency a couple of years ago introduced a space safety program.
Okay.
So there was or is a director with the European Space Agency, Rolf Denzing, who is a real champion of this theme, and who...
I thought it was more of a defense program.
No.
Okay.
No. And in fact, it's specifically not a defense program.
Okay.
And this was also one of the misunderstandings or misconceptions in the early years when the ideas were first starting to form, that certain governments, militaries were saying, well, no, this is something that we should be dealing with. But at some point it became clear that there would be a separation. The one is indeed defense related, but that's not related to the European Space Agency. And the other is related to space safety rather than space security. So the idea of monitoring objects in space, whether we're talking about fragments orbiting the planet so that we can protect our assets, not get them destroyed by pieces of shrapnel that are flying around, but also to understand which objects might be coming close to Earth and require protection, or for instance also if there are solar flares and you've got these plasma clouds coming our way, to have an early warning system. There have been situations in the past when our planet were taken by surprise when there was a flare, and then by the time we realized that it was coming our way, it was too late. So some of the assets in space or on the planet surface actually took damage, and so those are the themes that space safety deals with. And there were certain activities that were happening independently, and one of the great accomplishments, I would argue, with what ESA has done and what Rolf Denzing has done, was to harness it all, to give it a framework, to bring it all together, and to, on top of it, develop further thinking and further initiatives that are necessary in order to have a comprehensive system in place. So that's been going on, and it's actually the largest growing program with the European Space Agency.
Oh, great! That's happy to hear. But do we have some measures to combat such things? Sure. I mean, one of them is if you're talking about plasma storms, the plasma clouds, very often with satellites, if you know in time, then
can put the satellite into what's called safe mode. So then you switch off certain systems that would take damage if they were operating as the plasma cloud comes through. So you've got that. If you know that, or if you were to realize that there's a risk of some object, comet, asteroid hitting Earth, as has, for instance, happened not so long ago in Russia. Well, if you know about that well enough in advance, then you can advise the public to take cover, which was not the case at the time. So it just came in and, all sorts of damage.
Oh, you mean Chelyabinsk?
Pardon?
In Chelyabinsk, where everyone filmed it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So,
but it wasn't so big, probably.
Well, big enough. The mitigation measure that you take is a function of the situation that you're faced with. And so there may, of course, at some point also be a situation which can't be mitigated, and then that's what we have to deal with. But as long as we have no idea what's going on out there, sort of looking the way, we're not really doing ourselves a favor. So
exactly. Yeah. But what I have some things to mention. First of all, do you think that all this space watching, monitoring, etc., is our common thing? It can be split by nationalities and countries, but we are still competing in this. What India can offer right now, I don't know, but China is already doing something, Russia, USA, European Space Agency, are we united in this approach, or are we split by continents and our values?
In certain themes, there is an open channel, and nothing much more to say than that. If it's a question of safety on Earth. Then
we are united.
We are united.
Good.
Yeah.
So it's not the case where don't look up. We are highly represented, and the scientific staff is enough in governmental organizations to make a proper decision of it. Yeah. That's good. Thank you. Okay. To calming me down a little bit on that. So about the orbiting and Orbit 8. You are a part of this initiative, of this startup. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and your personal interest, why you decided to?
Well, for me, the interesting thing is always understanding how different elements, different concepts fit together. And there was a certain moment when Paul Urbans approached me. We had previous contact because of the last astronaut selection. He approached me at the time if I could provide some support here in Latvia, and which I also did. And then from that grew a certain working relationship, which led us to a question of, well, what is it that we could do for young people in order to help them make better decisions with respect to their careers? And I guess one of the triggers from Paul's point of view was that there's a disproportionately large number of students who sign up for or matriculate for certain subjects in the university, and then after 1 or 2 semesters drop out. And the drama in that is that after having been in university and having had an experience which wasn't so great, they don't very often start some other line of study, but they drop out altogether and they're essentially lost for academia, which means you're losing a lot of bright minds. So the idea was, how do we get to a point where there's a better alignment between the choices that people make at that point in their career, so before they actually go to university, but also later on, once they're studying a certain, in a certain discipline, because there's so many things that you can do. I mean, if you're talking about mechanical engineering, if you think about it, a mechanical engineer, what can a mechanical engineer do at the end of their studies? Say, if they have a master's degree, well, they can go into research and development. They can go into a project.
And they can go in space.
They can go into academia and teach. They can go into sales. There's so many things, or they can leave it all behind and become politicians. You know, so
and that happens more often than
so the idea is, and I'm going to stick with this mechanical engineer example in just a moment. So the first point is, what are the capabilities, the aptitudes that the individual has that would point him or her in the direction of a certain course of study. Okay? What are the abilities that the person has to have? But then once the decision with respect to the discipline has taken place, the next question is, what do you want to do with that degree? And along the lines of what we were just talking about. And that doesn't have so much to do with the aptitude as it does with the personality. So, are you somebody who is perhaps somewhat more introverted and prefers to work on his own or her own, then research and development might be the way to go. But if you're
I didn't make a mistake.
if you're somebody who likes to be a contributor to a piece of the whole, and for you it's not so important that this is your own, but that you're a part of a larger thing, then you might go in the direction of project engineering. If you like to, sell people solutions, then you might go into sales engineering and so forth. So that has to do with your personality. And then the final point is your values. And what are the values that you have? So if you take, again, the mechanical engineer, if let's say that somebody has the aptitude to study mechanical engineering, has the personality to do project work, but the values will then determine which sort of environment the person does it in. And those are indeed the three elements. And so, for instance, if your value system tells you you really need to protect this planet, then you might use all your knowledge and mechanical engineering ability and your project's drive to help develop wind turbines. Whereas if you're not too worried about the environment, but you think that power and speed is really cool, then you might go to work for Maserati. And as a mechanical engineer, you can do one and the other. Yeah. And so those are the three parts. So what we did was to model it, first of all, so to understand what the relations were between the different elements, and then to operationalize it by actually putting numbers to the variables, and then to put that into place. And that's exactly what Orbidate is all about. And so we're looking to put a product on the market that helps people, young people, make good professional decisions, that helps parents feel a little more at ease with the decisions that their kids do. Also, because as parents, very often we have, even if we know a lot about many different professions, our view will always be limited. I mean, that's the nature of the beast, and with a system like this, you're breaking through those limitations. And so that's essentially the idea.
And what's the plan? App, website?
It's already there.
It's already there.
Yeah, if you go online, you'll find orbidate.app, and that's the website that we're working with. And so, yeah, the idea is to partner with schools, to partner with parents, with students.
Universities probably also.
Pardon?
Universities also.
As well, yeah.
About your career track, are you happy with the place where you are right now?
Oh, yeah.
Did you plan that?
Yeah, I did actually. I'm a practitioner with a strong theoretical or academic background, or an academic with a strong practical background, either way you can look at it. But I tend to look at myself more as the former, so a practitioner with a strong academic background. And throughout my years of being a practitioner, there was always this idea, also, family members and friends who said, well, yeah, but when all this is over, you'll probably go back into academia and teach and essentially give back things that I had the privilege of gaining through the years of practice. And so I did that, and that's a big part of it. But I also have quite an inquisitive mind. Everybody has certain things, but there are lots of things that I don't do well, but one thing that I do reasonably well is figure stuff out and answer questions. And so...
we've noticed.
And so before I left the European Space Agency, about 2 years before I left, I sat down, and it was pretty clear that I had way too much energy to just go fishing. Nothing against fishing.
Yeah, be cautious of our listeners, please.
So I essentially decided for myself to take a three-pronged approach. So the first was to go back into teaching. The second was to get back into research, but now into research in this new emerging discipline of intelligence studies. And the third was to start my own consulting company, which I did, which is intelsource.eu. And so that's been going on for about 6-7 years now. A lot of the focus that I've had with the company has been on the development of I just recently published a book in November on counterintelligence, and I've got another one coming out now in July, also on counterintelligence, a few articles and so forth. And so I've harnessed that into a system that I'm also providing.
Any tips and tricks from you for early stage career researchers that are there and thinking about their career choices?
Yeah, one thing is to really, two things. One, focus on what you're passionate about. Passion is super important, so rather than to use a sort of opportunistic approach, if I do this, then it might keep me, do something that you love, and that'll help you move forward. Another thing is to harness your passion, though. So in other words, once you make a decision what you're passionate about, to not allow yourself to say, well, let me add this, and let me add this, and let me add this, but to set clear goals, stick to the plan, change it only if you have to change it, and once you've reached that target, or just before you've reached that target, set the next target. And if you like reaching targets, if you like reaching objectives, that's a really good way to do it. And I think in both cases, it's important. So, like I say, go with what you're passionate about, and don't let your many interests go so out of control that you don't actually finish up because you're so busy exploring all these different avenues. So yeah, that's what I would suggest.
All that is very interesting. I just wanted to ask you again if you could emphasize you had multiple roles from space through academia, through research and so on. How did you manage to maintain balance between all of these plus your personal life? Is it hard? Are there any tips and tricks? Is it possible?
No, I think it was pretty easy. I mean, I've got 2 kids. They're both out of the house and have families of their own now, but we had a lot of fun together as they were growing up. On the weekends, we had a lot of particularly sports activities. And we were based in Holland at the time, so we had a co-ed softball team that we played together in. And during the week, we spent a lot of time together in the evenings doing homework, essentially. So the stuff that the teachers didn't do, that's what we had to step up to the plate. And but that was also quality time. You know, we had this big flip chart at home, and so it was kind of fun to be on the flip chart. And so yeah, we always had our meals together, our dinners together, and that was important too. And you know, it's a relatively short time. I mean, you know, I've reached a certain age now where there are things that I did before I had kids, where I had a lot of time. Then when I had the kids, then doing a little bit less of that stuff, but that's only a limited period of time. And then eventually the kids are out of the house, and then you've got all this time again, and then you have to figure out what to do with all the time. And so that's how I filled it.
But thank you very much that you didn't prefer fishing over our interview today. Thank you that you have some time for us.
Absolutely.
And, do you have anything that you would like to bring on the table to tell or?
Well, yeah, I think I'd like to re-emphasize what I said earlier, which is, you know, really to stay true to what it is that you're passionate about, to harness the abilities that you have, whatever it means, but to harness them, and also what's really important, and I didn't mention that before, to have fun. It's important to have fun. So to enjoy the journey, so not just always be
to the target.
And to get there, but while you're en route, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, heck, what's the point? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Euraxis Smart Talks podcast.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode and can't wait to share more with you next time.
You can follow us and find more episodes on the Euraxis portal, our social media profiles, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
This episode was prepared by hosts Daria Aksionova and Jovan Aranjelovic, editor Isar Peer, and is dedicated in memoriam of Professor Miroslav Trajanovic.